This project will focus on the 2008 recession, its effect on the economies around the world, and how we can move forward and recover from this recession.
This first graph is looking at the U.S. Historical prices of the S&P 500 on a log scale. We're starting in 1870 and going all the way up to current price levels in 2014. One of the key things you can notice immediately is that the regression line is sloping upward positively, and this tells us that, according to numbers, the S&P 500 grows at an average rate of 1.7% per year. A few things we can take away from this: that it tells us that the U.S. S&P 500 historically has grown and possibly will grow to the future, even though there may be large economic downturns such as the Great Depression. The S&P 500 bounced back up fairly quickly, even with the recession in 2000 and 2008. These recessions never reached a mean regression line and bounced back up fairly quickly as well. Now, this next graph is looking at unemployment rate and long-term unemployment throughout history. The main goal of this graph is kind of to figure out how the Great Recession of 2008 was different from other economic downturns. If we look historically, unemployment rate, which is in the red line, made historical highs in 1980, touching about 11%. But in the recession of 2008, we see it did not reach this 11%, and briefly touched a bit over 10%. The key difference with the 2008 recession was long-term unemployment rate, which is defined as those who are unemployed for more than 26 weeks, or in other words, half a year. Now, in 1980, long-term unemployment reached about 2%, but in 2008, long-term unemployment broke this barrier and almost doubled it, reaching about 4%. This signifies that the Great Recession of 2008 was especially deep and especially hurtful because people were unemployed for a longer period of time. Okay, so this next graph is looking at how the recession impacted countries all around the world. And the red signifies a decrease in real GDP for the year 2009. This is 1 year post the recession, while the green countries signify positive change in real GDP. Now, a very brief look at this graph, you can see North America, South America, Europe, and Russia were hit the hardest with the recession, with Ukraine almost going down 18% in real GDP. And countries that were largely unaffected or not affected as much were South Asian countries and African countries. There's a few theories behind both. One theory is that a lot of the Western countries were largely economically interdependent. The European Union definitely was economically interdependent because of their integration. But why weren't South Asian countries hit too hard? One view is that these countries, especially India, have a high savings rate where people save their money to that end. With the high savings rate, you can kind of withstand economic downturns, use money in your savings. And also, for Africa, Africa wasn't largely integrated into the world economy. Not much was imported from there, not much was exported from there. So, because of the lack of integration with the world economy, they kind of withstood the recession. This graph is looking at the composition of the U.S. labor force broken down by age. Historically, in the 1980s, we see about 50% of the United States labor force was younger than 34 years old and older than 16 years old. But over time, especially after the year 2000 and after 2005, we see a big jump in the share of the labor force by those older than 55, signified by this dip over here. And it's projected to be, according to the Federal Reserve, almost 10% higher share of the labor force by these older people than in 1980. This is key because with an older labor force, it may not lead to more innovation and more growth. So going forward, the United States has to encourage this growth through education, through incentivizing innovation, to ensure that the United States can still grow with the aging labor force.